you can install Nagios for your use, and once that is done, we'll be finally showing you how to create a monitoring service in Nagios, and that would be the last part of this particular session. Now, without any further delays, let's begin with it.
So before moving on with the session, please subscribe to our channel.
And also hit the bell icon for the upcoming updates from our channel. And also, if you enjoy our content, you can leave a like. So guys, continuous monitoring is basically the process of continuously keeping a track of all the servers and the applications which are hosted on that servers and creating a log out of it, right? Now, how does it help? Basically, it helps in cases when your application transitions from an active to a critical state, right? And sometimes what happens is you're not on the application all the time checking whether your application is up or down. So your work is basically done by a tool which continuously checks whether the application is up or down. Right? Is there any performance issues? Is there any non-responsiveness? Is there any downtime? All of this is managed or is basically monitored by the continuous monitoring tool, right? Now, the moment application transitions from an okay to a critical state or a non-responsive state, there are a set of rules that you defined, right? For example, if it's unresponsive, probably a mail or a notification is triggered to the administrators, and basically what will the administrators, they'll properly restart the service or they'll restart the application, right? If there is a bug that is encountered, so for example, if the program goes into a infinite loop and the memory goes haywire, or the memory basically gets full under seconds, in that case also it becomes a critical case, right? So earlier we saw that it was probably a non-responsive case, but in this case it becomes a critical case because even the other applications on the same server becomes affected because now the memory of the whole server, it became full. So in that case, the mail would go to the developers and also the administrators. Developers, why? Because now they have to identify where exactly the problem is, right? So probably the problem is within the code that they've written for the application. So they'll fix it. And the notification also goes to the administrators because once they are done with the code, the administrators basically have to take that code and upload on the servers again, right? So guys, this is what a continuous monitoring tool is. Now, why is the continuous monitoring tool important? Let's discuss that, right? So let's discuss these points one by one. So your continuous monitoring tool detects any network or server problems. Like I said, it continuously monitors all your services, all your applications, all your servers which are running and hosting your application, right? And it tracks for any kind of change, right? It generates a stream of log, and in that stream of log, the moment there is a change, the continuous monitoring tool automatically creates a notification or an email and send it to the specified contacts in the rule, right? So what kind of changes? It will look at any network or server problems. It will basically see all the security issues as well, right? For example, if someone is planning a DOS attack on you and they try to do that, they initiate attack. So your continuous monitoring tool, if you set up it with the correct configuration, it would be able to identify if a DOS attack is happening on your website, right? And continuous monitoring tool does not only help you to identify what just happened to your set of systems, right, or your server, it also helps you to identify what exactly caused that problem, which is very helpful because now the developer knows exactly what has to be done, what has to be fixed. Rather than just saying that the application is down, your continuous monitoring tool will also tell you the details of the event which occurred, which is a great thing because that would help us narrow down on the problem or the segment which basically caused the problem in the whole program, right? The next thing is it also monitors and troubleshoots server performance issues, right? For example, your hardware on which your application is running, your continuous monitoring tool also keeps a track of how the server health is, right? How fast is it to all the requests which are made, right? And how are the response times, how are the performance basically of that server. So all of that is logged, and at times when the performance goes below a certain level, for example, what happens is, guys, the computers never get slow. It's just that the applications or the softwares which run on those computers, they become advanced, right? For example, if you have Windows 10 and you updated your Windows 10 one day, you probably get some new features added to it, but with those new features, that particular operating system is now going to take up more processing power or more resources from the memory, etc., right? And this can cause a problem when you have servers which run 24/7 and have applications which get upgraded timely, right? In that case, you might have to change your server or system, or you might have to upgrade your hardware. So basically, your continuous monitoring tool can also help you in identifying when your system health goes into a critical state, so that you know that when you want to change that particular system, right? So guys, these were pretty much all the reasons that why continuous monitoring tool is so important, right? Why companies are preferring the last stage of their DevOps to be a continuous feedback cycle wherein they have put the continuous monitoring tools, right? So these were the reasons. Now moving forward, let's discuss continuous monitoring quickly using a DevOps life cycle. So we have discussed this diagram before, but let us just summarize what we just learned, right? So that we can picture it better while we are basically implementing our DevOps life cycle. So a developer does a commit on the version control system. The version control system basically picks up the code and deploys it on the testing server, right? The testing server does its test. If the test fails, the feedback goes back to the developer. In case the feedback doesn't fail, in that case, the code is again pushed by the CI server to the production server. And now from here, the continuous monitoring starts, right? So your continuous monitoring tool is basically going to check the server on which the website has been or the application has been hosted for any performance issues, right? It will check for network errors, etc., etc. So it will be on a vigilante mode in that case, right? And check for any faults in that particular application or the hardware on which it has been hosted, right? And the stream of logs that I was taking, so even if your systems are okay, the logs are continuously generated, right? And if there is any change in the log, a notification is basically passed on to the developer team, right? Now, based on the severity of the event which has happened, it could be a critical event, it could be a non-responsive event, it could be a minor event as well. So based on the events, we define rules. So if it's a critical event, we'll probably want to employ our solutions architect guy of our company as well. If it's a minor issue, probably only one or two administrators would be able to solve it. Either two administrators or one administrator and a developer, so that if that minor issue is being caused by some code which has been recently uploaded, only the developer can fix it, right? So all of this is followed, and keeping in mind all your organization needs, you create this life cycle, and continuous monitoring becomes an integral part of it, because without it, you will not be able to identify how well your DevOps life cycle is actually performing. Alright guys, so we saw that Nagios is one of the most popular continuous, or is one of the most, like, we looked at top 3 continuous monitoring tools and we saw that Nagios was one of them, right? And today in this module, we are going to discuss in detail about what Nagios is and how it works. So guys, Nagios is nothing but an open source software which helps us in continuously monitoring applications which are running on remote hosts, right? For this, Nagios follows a master slave architecture. There is one server on which Nagios is installed, and the others are basically just normal systems on which applications are running, right? So in order for this Nagios server to interact with the services which are running on some other server, you have to install some plugins on those servers, on those hosts which wants to get monitored, and these plugins are chosen based on the platform that they're running. For example, are they running a Windows platform, or are they running a Linux platform, right? Now, what all can you monitor with Nagios? So as you can see over here, you can create monitoring service for literally any kind of things. You can monitor printers, you can monitor applications, you can monitor switches, network switches, right? And you can monitor hosts, right? You can monitor literally anything in Nagios which is in the computer realm and is running on a remote host. What are the components of Nagios, right? So there are basically three main components of what make Nagios the most effective continuous monitoring tool. So the first component is the Nagios GUI, then you have the scheduler, and then you have plugins in Nagios. So let's understand this one by one, right? So let's first talk about the Nagios GUI, guys. So inside, basically the GUI is the web interface that Nagios offers you, and that is basically a dashboard for you on which you can monitor monitor all the services which are running on different servers that you have attached to your Nagios server, right? And also you can have a look at all the hosts which are connected to your Nagios server, right? So along with checking them, you can also have a look at their status. You can also have a look at the logs. All of that is possible inside the Nagios GUI. So basically Nagios GUI acts as a front end for you, right? The second component is a scheduler, right? Now scheduler itself is again a very main centric component of Nagios, which basically does all the work of scheduling, right? So what has to be monitored and when exactly it has to be monitored. For example, you are basically monitoring the ping service of a server, right? Now, when do you have to manage it, right? So at what intervals you'll have to go ahead and check whether that ping service is working or not, and what exactly do you have to manage, right? If, for example, ping you have to manage, what all other services you have to manage, and what all servers you have to manage it on or monitor it on, right? So that all of this job is done by the scheduler, right? And then you have plugins. So basically, when you talk about monitoring hosts, talk about monitoring different servers. So if you have like 1,000 servers in your company that you have to monitor, it's not that you have to install Nagios on the servers that you have to monitor. For example, like I told you guys, you need a Nagios server. So your Nagios server will basically take care of all the monitoring part, right? And with your Nagios server, you attach your application servers, right? And your application servers are basically going to have some plugins. So you don't have to install Nagios on them, on the application servers. All you have to do is install a plugin on it, right? And those plugins are called nrpe plugins, right? You install it on them, and using the nrpe plugin, what the scheduler does is the scheduler basically sends a request to the nrpe plugin along with the command using which it has to monitor that particular host, and the nrpe plugin basically helps the scheduler to get all the logs related to that particular service which was requested. And once the logs have been received by the scheduler, they get forwarded to the GUI part of Nagios, and then that Nagios GUI then represents the log in terms of their status, in terms of graphs, in terms of many other useful visualization techniques through which you get to know how your host is performing in terms of its hardware, in terms of the application which is running on it, and etc. Right? So this is how basically the Nagios architecture works, guys. So Nagios follows a master-slave architecture. All your hosts are on separate machines, right? And your Nagios has a dedicated server for it. You can also have applications installed on the same system as the Nagios is installed on, right? And Nagios has the capability of monitoring its own services as well. But usually when you talk about it in production environment, or you talk about how companies use it when they are dealing with monitoring applications, it always happens on a scale that you have a Nagios server, and beneath the server you have a lot of hosts which are basically hosting your application, getting monitored by Nagios scheduler. So let me quickly jump on to my browser so that you guys can see that we have two hosts right now, localhost and slave one. This we already did in the last session, where I showed you guys how you can add a host to the Nagios server, right? The host which is being monitored. So right now the status of this host is that it is up and running, right? Now what I want to do is I want to create a monitoring service which for an application which will be running on this slave. So what I'm going to do, if I go to services right now, I can see there are no services which are monitoring any application which is running on the remote host, right? So what I'll do is I'll first install a service called sudo apt get install Apache 2. I want to install an Apache service which I can monitor in Nagios for this particular server. Okay, so Apache is getting installed. Yes, so Apache is installed now. Now if I go to the browser, I should be able to see for the Nagios slave an Apache service, right? So Apache page is working. Now what I'll do, I'll go to my server, right? Let me just clear the screen. And now I will go to templates, or let's go to templates, or let us go to localhost configuration first, right? Now in this localhost configuration, you will find a service for, right? So I want this service to be copied. I'll just copy this service. right? And what I'll do, I'll make changes to this particular service and I'll make it a service for monitoring the HTTP connections. So what I'll do now, I'll just go to the configuration file of my host 1.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides DevOps online training validated and certified by NASSCOM Future Skills and IBM. The course link is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
Right, and I'll paste the service over here and let's make changes to the service now. Right, so this is the service. Now we want to use a template for the service. Let's say it's not a local service, I'll say it's a generic service. So there's a template for generic service inside templates.cfg. You can have a look at that. The host name for this service would be the same as the host name for your host. So the host name for my host.
Just a quick info, guys. Test your knowledge of DevOps by answering this question. Which of the following are the popular tools of DevOps? A. Jenkins and Docker. B. Nagios and ELK. C. Kubernetes and Ansible. D. All of the above. Comment your answer in the comment section below. Subscribe to Intellipaat to know the right answer. Now, let's continue with the session.
Is slave 1, right? So I'll write exactly slave 1 in my service as well. So I'll do that. I'll call it slave 1. Service description. What do I want this description for this service to be? Check Apache. Okay, and the command for this particular service would be check_http, right? So this is the official command for checking the if anything is running on port 80 of any computer, right? So you can have a look. If you want to try some other application that you want to monitor, you can just Google out the service or the command that you would use over here to monitor that particular application. Right, and most of the times you will get a command. In case you don't get a command, just Google how you can define a command for basically monitoring the application that you want. Right, now all you have to do is, if you find the right place where you just have to create a command, go inside commands.cfg, right? That is there in your etc directory. And inside the commands.cfg file, all you do is create that command, and which I'll show you in a moment, the way to create a command, and then you can use that command over here as well. So check_http is already a command which is existing in my Nagios server, and I'll show you the definition of this particular command when we go in commands.cfg. For now, the service is ready. So what I'll do, I'll just save the service, right? And now I'll just restart the server. So for restarting, this is the command. I'll pass this command. So my Nagios server is now restarted. Now if I go inside hosts, I can see slave 1 is up. Now if I go inside services, I can see that slave 1 now has a service which is in the pending state, right? So what will happen, it will basically take like 2 minutes for this to refresh and to check whether a service is actually running on port 80 of slave 1. Okay, so let's give it that time and then check after some time. Alright guys, so as you can see, the service that we defined is now under the status of OK, right? So now my service is running fine, and you can check the status over here that HTTP is OK, and 11,192 bytes were responded back to the request in 0.002 seconds. So you can get all the performance details here. You can see that the service is up and running since the past 5 minutes. So I think it took around a good 2.5 minutes for the service to turn green, because Nagios took that time to basically analyze if the service is healthy or not. Alright, now similarly, if I disable the service, you will be able to see that in another 2 minutes this server will go into critical state. Right, so let us do that. I'll just go to my terminal and I'll say sudo service apache 2 stop. Right, I just did that, and now if I go to the IP address, I can see that the page is no longer coming. Now it is 5 minutes 39 seconds right now, so let's see 6 minutes 45 seconds right now. Let's see when our service gets into a critical state. Alright guys, so as you can see, the status has now changed, and it says that the status has changed since the past 18 seconds, right? So it took a good 4 minutes for this service to go into critical state. I guess that's how long Nagios checks in intervals as to whether a service is working or not, right? So as you can see, it says connection refused. Reason being, now Apache is not running on that particular system. Alright guys, so this is how you create a service in Nagios, and similarly you can create any kind of service for your particular application that you want to monitor. Right, all you have to do is either check if you have an internal command which is going to match for your application, or you'd have to create a command for yourself using some plugins, right? So all of that can be checked online when you're working, because there could be zillion applications that you would be working with. Having a look at all the applications is difficult, because with everyone they'll have different kind of needs for the kind of applications that they are monitoring. Okay. Alright, so I forgot about one thing. Let us also have a look at how you can create a command in Nagios, right? So let me jump back to my terminal. So all I have to do now is I'll have to go inside commands.cfg, right? So let's go inside it. So we use the command check_http, right? So let's first that command first. So if you go inside commands.cfg, you will have all these commands over here. Notify host by email, then you have check host alive, then you have check local disk, check local load, then you have check local procs, check local user, check local swap, check local mrt, check ftp, right? So all these commands are then being mapped to their command line usage. So if you pass this command, this command is basically being passed on your Nagios host if you are using the command check ftp. Okay, then you have check hpjd, check snmp, check dsp. What I'm going to do is I'll just go click on where is, and I'll search for http. Okay, so here I get it. So on this command, you can check that if you want to define this command, the command name is check_http. The command line for this is $user1 and then check http-i host address $argument1, right? So this is the command which you are using when basically you are just calling check_http while defining a service. So basically what you're doing is in your service, you're basically calling the check_http command, which in turn is calling this particular command, which is being passed on to the command line, through which you are able to check whether HTTP is working or not, right? So let's define a command for ourselves. Let us call this command as, command name would be command _name. Let's call it test _http. Okay, and the command line for this, the command line command for this would be this. Let's paste it, right? And let me just align it. All right, so this is done, and now basically all we have to do is close the brackets, save the file, right? So the file is saved, and now let's go inside sudo nano host1.cfg. okay, and now I would want to create a service, right? Let's name this service as, we'll use everything which is the same here except the command. So we'll just go down to the earlier service that we created. We'll just copy everything, paste it here. So we have to paste this commands here, and then we'll close the brackets. The check command will now change to test_http. The check Apache, let's change the text to check Apache test, right? And everything else will be the same. Okay, now let me show you one more thing. So you can also control the interval in which Nagios is basically checking your command. So what you can do is, let me just save the file here. We'll go to templates.cfg, right? So let's go inside. So we're using the generic service template, right? So let us go inside sudo nano templates.cfg, and now let's try to search for generic service, right? So here it is. So the generic service is defined like this, that you have check freshness is 0, notifications enabled is 1, event handler enabled 1, flap process performance data, and you can check over here that in check interval it's 10 minutes, right? And the retry interval is 2 minutes. So if the service is functioning normally, in that case, it should check for the freshness of the service, or check whether the service is again working or not in 10 minutes from the time that the service goes down. So let us change this to 1, or what you can do is you can also change this when you're calling this service. So let's change it over there. So basically you have to remember that this keyword, which is check_interval and retry_interval. Okay, so let's go out. We're not going to change anything here. What I'm going to do is I'll go to sudo nano host 1 underscore cfg, and now in the service I'll specify retry underscore interval, and I'll give that number to be say 1 minute, right? Similarly, what I'll do, I'll say check underscore interval, and I'll again specify it to be 1 minute. So every 1 minute, even if the service is up and running, it will check if the service is running now. If not, it will retry again to check the service whether it's up again or not in the another 1 minute. So with this, you should get a faster response onto when your service will become okay on your Nagios dashboard. All right. So we have specified this. So we have changed the services. So let's save the file now. So I'll save the file like this, and now I'll restart Nagios. So let's search for that command. Here it is. I've restarted Nagios. And now if we go inside the browser, here's my browser. What I'll do is I'll do a refresh. I'll go to services. And now I can see there are two services which are running. So because we stopped the Apache service on our server, that's why it is saying it's in a critical state right now. So what I'm going to do, let me go here and okay, so we'll start Apache server, but first let's wait for this pending state to become to critical. So what I'll do, I'll just click refresh once again. I'll go to services and let's wait for this service to become critical. In that case, what I'm going to do, we're going to see that in how much time it becomes okay from the time when we basically up the service. All right, so let's wait for this to become critical. All right, so as you can see, the service is now critical, and what we can do now is we'll go to this system and we'll start the service now. So I'll start the service like this, right? So this service of mine, which is check Apache, is basically working at 10 minutes interval and 2 minutes retry time. On the other hand, this service, which is check Apache test service, is retrying at every 1 minute and checking the service also at every 1 minute. So let's see if there's a difference that we see over here. So we'll just refresh it and see which service becomes up and running again. Alright, so you can see that my check Apache test is already in the OK state now, right? So it became OK faster than the check Apache service. If I again refresh the service, I can see that my check Apache service is still in the critical state. Reason being, the check interval in that case I did not configure, and it took the default values of my generic service template, which had 10 minutes of check interval and 2 minutes of retry. Right? So basically, if this state is in the retry state right now, it should take around 2 minutes for this to become okay, right? On the other hand, my Apache service, because my check intervals is just 1 minute and even my retry interval is 1 minute, it became okay faster because Nagios is now checking the service pretty early than the way it is checking it with this particular service. So if I again click on these services, I can still see that this is in a critical state and check Apache state is in a OK state. All right. Let me quickly jump on to my AWS Management Console to basically launch a server over there, right? So here's my AWS Management Console, guys. I'll go into running instances. I'll click on launch an instance, select the operating system that I want, which is Ubuntu, select t2.micro because in that case it will be fall under free tier. Then go to security group, select a security group which is open. So for me, it's this one. You can also select a security group if you have already created, or create a security group which basically should have all the ports open to the host that you're basically going to connect to Nagios, right? And if not all ports, specifically the ports that Nagios work on, they should be enabled on that, right? So once you select the desired security group, just select your keep here and click on launch instance. So while your instance is being launched, let us label this instance as Nagios-1. Alright, now my instance is being launched, so let us go to our running instances, and while this is being launched, let me just quickly open my putty tool. So here is where I'm gonna enter my IP address. So let me just refresh it, so it has started running. Let's copy the IP address, go to my putty tool, paste the IP address, click on open, and let's see what happens now. So I click on yes. So my instance is ready. It asked me for the login. Alright, so here I am. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to update the machine using sudo apt-get update. So my machine is now getting updated. Now guys, what I've done is I've already noted down some commands which will help us install Nagios. So here they are, right? So we have updated the machine. The next step is to install the required softwares which would support running Nagios. So the softwares will now get installed. So let us give it this time for it to install all the software. Alright, so my softwares are installed. Our next step would be to add a user for Nagios. So I've done that. Let's add a group also for Nagios. That is also done. Next step is to do a little modification to the group and user. So basically we have added this user to this group. That's done. Now let's download the Nagios core file. File is downloaded. Now let's unzip this file. File is unzipped. Now let's go inside this version. So you're inside the directory now. And now let's configure all these files with the metrics of the username and the command that we're going to pass with it, right? So it's configured. Now let's build this project using the make command. So the project is now being built. Now once it's built, we'll start installing it using sudo make install. So this might take a while, so let's wait. Alright, so my files have been built. Now let's install them. Files have been installed. Now let's install the additional things as well, such as command A, install init, and install config. Alright, so they are installed. Now let's go ahead and do some modification to our Apache website. Add the user for Apache. Alright, so this is done now. Our next step would be to install the required plugins for Nagios to work as expected. So plugins basically give us the advantage of additional features which get attached to Nagios once we install the plugins. Alright, so we're inside the Nagios plugins folder. Let's configure it with the usernames. And now let's build the project. Alright, so my files have been configured. Now let's build them. Build, and now let's install them. Alright, so they have been installed. Now let's make some changes to our Apache software. Let's configure a password for Nagios. Password would be this. Pass this command. And now let's restart Apache 2. So Apache 2 is restart. Now let's create the Nagios service. And let's copy this code from over here. Save the file. Now let's enable the Nagios service so that it gets started even when we restart. And finally, let's start the Nagios service now. So the Nagios service is now started, guys. Now what we can do is we can go to the IP address of my server with /Nagios. Now it'll ask the username and the password. The username would be Nagios-admin and the password would be this, right? So the username could be Nagios-admin without the hyphen. Password would be this. Alright, right. So now we have successfully installed Nagios on our server, guys, and this is how the GUI looks like. And if you have a look at the hosts, so right now it is monitoring itself because localhost is listed over here and the status is up, right? Everything seems fine. So guys, this is how Nagios looks like on the GUI side, right? In our next session, we are going to discuss the different components that Nagios has. We're going to dive a little deeper into, the Nagios hood and see what kind of different things we have under it, right?
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides DevOps online training validated and certified by NASSCOM Future Skills and IBM. The course link is given in the description below.
Okay guys, we've come to the end of this session. I hope this session was helpful and informative for you. If you have any queries, leave a comment down below.
Thanks for watching.